Habari! Welcome to Social Studies with Miss Rogers, World History Edition. Last class, we introduced ourselves to the idea of a new era, the Middle Ages. And the Middle Ages has numerous names, such as the Medieval Era, the Age of Faith, the Dark Ages, and my question is, do these names also fit Africa during this time period? Africa has a long-standing tradition of passing down knowledge, education, and culture through storytelling, which is so cool. I'm here for it. But without written records, it does force those interested in learning about African societies to dig a little bit deeper. So, let's dig. Africa at this time is known as the Dark Continent. Think of how we had the Greek Dark Ages. It was called this because there weren't very many records of events that took place, and the same goes for Africa. Remember, they pass their history down through storytelling, aka they aren't in the practice of writing things down. Some African societies don't even have a written language right now. And that actually creates a misconception about African societies, that they're lesser because we tend to associate written records with true civilizations. But that isn't necessarily a fair accusation to make. The 5 characteristics of civilizations are honestly just a made-up list of what some group of guys at one point thought was important. You listening to me, or you listening to your other teachers in class, or even a crash course video is the same kind of learning that these African societies indulge in. So don't think it's much different. You just choose to take notes where they are trained to listen for and embrace the small details. Many people at this time don't have very much experience with Africa except for places like Egypt and areas that come under control of the Greeks and the Romans. 2 other early kingdoms within Africa include the Kush and the Axum. The Kingdom of Kush was a Nubian kingdom located in modern-day Egyptian and Sudan areas. It was south of the ancient Egyptians, still along the Nile River. We already know the Nile River provided very fertile soil, so it's safe to say the Kush had pretty consistent harvests as well. The Egyptians originally ruled over Kush, and then Kush freed itself and later captured Egypt, and they pretty much take turns ruling each other for a while. Like I said, world history is taking turns conquering each other, but the point is, they were religiously and culturally intertwined. Like their northern neighbors, the Kush kingdoms built similar pyramids to bury their rulers. Their rulers were expected to be as educated as their high nobles, because how can you rule effectively if you're uneducated? That was a smart move on their part. Fun fact, Kush had an insane amount of female rulers for the time period, which really says a lot about their society. While most of the world at this time is belittling women's existence, the Kush are being ruled by females. I need me a time machine. Now, the Kush did have a writing system, but kind of like the Indus River Valley, we've not been able to crack the translation code for the whole language. So parts of both this kingdom and ancient Africa still remains a mystery to us. The Kush were known for their art, their architecture, their dedication to knowledge, and their amazing bow and arrow skills. The bow and arrows were really a trademark for the kingdom. The real split between Egypt and Kush occurred over many years as various invaders from modern-day European lands invaded Egypt, and eventually another neighboring kingdom called Axum invaded and took over the Kush. Axum was located in modern-day Ethiopia and Eritrea. We just mentioned how they conquered the Kush, or the Kushites, and they'll continue to take land in Egypt and even areas in the Middle East like Saudi Arabia and Yemen. Axum was known to be a huge trade center having valuable natural resources like gold and salt. And Axum had big trading posts all throughout North Africa as well as the Middle East and parts of Asia. Due to their business in many parts of the world, kings of Axum would ensure they could read and write in numerous languages so that they could communicate with people when they traveled. In the 4th century, the language Ge'ez becomes popular in Axum, and the Axum king Ezana embraced Christianity. He made Christianity the dominant religion in the kingdom and even built Christian cathedrals like the Cathedral of St. Mary of Zion. This is also around the same time that Emperor Constantine of Rome is adopting Christianity, right before Rome fell. The Axum were known for building obelisks, these giant pillars which marked burial grounds for kings, queens, and other super rich people. One of the only obelisks still standing today was constructed by King Ezana himself to pay tribute to the kingdom's newfound faith in Christianity. It's believed that as Christianity spread, the practice of burying people under the obelisks stopped. Exum thrived as a Christian kingdom. However, as Islam started growing in both northern Africa and in the Middle East, religious competition started taking root in the land. Over time, the Christian kingdom lost control over lands adopting and growing in the Islamic faith, and that would lead to the downfall of the Exum Empire. Exum falls towards the beginning of the Middle Ages, so now I want to mention African kingdoms and societies thriving during the Middle Ages. Throughout our Middle Ages unit, I want to keep a timeline so you can see all of the different things going on in different areas around the same time. Ghana was first established before Rome fell, before the Middle Ages started, but it's going to be around for a long time throughout the Middle Ages. The Kingdom of Ghana was actually called Wagadu. The kings of this kingdom were referred to as Ghana, and Arab traders would hear the term Ghana and assumed it was the name of the kingdom, and that is what it's commonly referred to throughout history. Now, in modern times, there is a nation, a country called Ghana, and this is not the same place that we're talking about right now. The Middle Ages empire, called Ghana or Wagadu, is located here, and the current Republic of Ghana is located here. Now, the Middle Ages Ghana was known for being abundant in gold. A Middle Ages explorer once wrote that the Ghana kings were so wealthy and had so much gold that they were most likely the richest kings in the entire world. The Ghanan kings would hold audiences for their people. He would let his subjects come to him with grievances such as neighbors not getting along, and they would have sort of like a hearing where the king would make a judgment on who was right and who was wrong. And those types of hearings would be considered friendly. Hearings regarding violence and other severe crimes were considered not so friendly and were handled a little bit differently. They created a drink concoction, and an accused person must drink this concoction, and it was believed that if they threw up this concoction, they were considered innocent. But if they did not throw up, they were guilty, and they would suffer the king's wrath. The kings of Ghana were very proud of how wealthy the empire was, and they continuously traded with Arabs and North African Berber tribes. And through this trade, where the Berbers actually acted like middlemen, taking goods to and from where they needed to go, we will see a giant trade route form called the Trans-Saharan Caravans, where the camels will be known as the Fleet of the Desert because the route is so busy all the time. Through this trade system, we believe Ghana may have been the first African kingdom to have adopted Islam, though they did have their own native religion as well. Religious clashes can often lead to civil wars, and civil war was exactly what weakens Ghana to the point that one of their subordinate kingdoms rises and takes power, and that kingdom is known as Mali. Mali became an Islamic nation, and this happens when Berbers, or nomadic traders, would trade both with Arabs and North Africans and ended up converting themselves. Whether this be because they connected to the religion or felt that having something in common with those they wanted to trade with would make them more money, who knows? But regardless of the reason, the Berbers who then came to trade in West Africa brought the religion with them and they influenced the land. Oh look, more cultural diffusion. Mali, just like Ghana, was very large and extraordinarily wealthy, but they're best remembered for their king Mansa Musa, the King of Kings. Mansa Musa came to power in 1312 and is said to have been the wealthiest man to ever live. We already said that Mali was an Islamic nation, and Mansa Musa was a dedicated Muslim. So in 1324, Mansa Musa took his Hajj, or his pilgrimage, to Mecca. Sources can't decide if Mansa Musa took 1,000 people on his journey or 60,000 on his journey. But regardless, he had a giant horde of soldiers and regular civilians and slaves accompanying him on his journey, along with at least 100 camels just carrying piles of gold. They say the line of his caravan stretched as far as the eye could see. Whoa. You're telling me that Mansa Musa can take 100 camels carrying gold along with a posse of tens of thousands of people on his Hajj, and that's fine. But I'm extra for wanting to wear my princess dress during Spirit Week? Unbelievable. On Mansa Musa's Hajj, they say that while traveling, Mansa Musa stopped in many cities, giving out gold, building houses for people in need, and also building mosques along the way. Some sources say that when he stopped in Egypt, he spent so much money, he literally destroyed their economy, and they didn't recover for years. Yes, too much money in an economy is bad. You need a balance. Too much money leads to inflation, aka prices skyrocket. Traveling Europeans saw him and told tales of Mansa Musa's wealth, and this started rumors around Europe that Africa was a giant gold pit. He truly was a legend in Europe. When Mansa Musa returned from his Hajj, he brought back architects and scholars to build mosques, specifically in Timbuktu. He wanted Timbuktu to become an Islamic learning center focused on both education and faith. So in addition to mosques, he built schools and a university as well. The reason to learn of Mansa Musa is acknowledging that there was not only an African king who was ridiculously wealthy, but also overly charitable and who didn't mind sharing his wealth with others who needed it. He also single-handedly put his kingdom on the radar of the rest of the known world, and he additionally acts as a positive role model for both faith and education in the West African world. Overall, he's an amazingly positive symbol for West African history. Fun theory? It was rumored that Mansa Musa wanted to conduct trade across the Atlantic Ocean, so people from Mali may have actually reached the Americas. And we don't know this for sure, but that would be so cool if it was true. Excuse me, sir, I'm teaching. Please don't be rude. After civil war divided Mali in the mid-1300s, we see the kingdom Songhai take over in the 1400s, which is also the last West African kingdom we're going to talk about today. Sunni Ali was the first king of the Songhai Empire, and he was known as one of the most effective military strategists to have ever lived. Sunni Ali expanded the Songhai Empire to this massive chunk of land, and he, just like our friend Alexander the Great from Greece, never lost a battle. The next notable ruler from the Songhai was Askia Muhammad I, or Askia Muhammad the Great. The Great? What's that political legacy, Alexander? Songhai, like Mali, adopted Islam as their official religion, with Gao as its capital. Muhammad, similar to Mansa Musa, was a devout Muslim, and he too made his pilgrimage to Mecca. Mansa Musa must have been a role model for Muhammad because he didn't have as luxurious of a road trip, but he did bring lots of gold, and when he returned, he too focused on Timbuktu as a center of learning and faith. Songhai, forming towards the end of the Middle Ages, will last until the Middle Ages are done and over with during the Renaissance era. Now, before we close class, I do want to mention some other areas of Africa that might not be gigantic empires, but are still valid and important to learn about. So we just focused on African Middle Ages in the West, and while they're doing their thing over in the West, Eastern Africa during the Middle Ages sees Swahili culture forming. And this wasn't a big kingdom or empire, but like many areas we've talked about previously, a bunch of city-states. Some of these city-states are going to include Zanzibar and Mombasa, and like Greece, these Eastern African city-states did their own thing as their own communities. And sure, each community had a king, but it wasn't like a Mansa Musa, I'm the richest man in the whole world kind of king. Think more low-key and down-to-earth. We remember that the Greek city-states were super different from each other, but they still got lumped into the one big group, Greek city-states, because they shared the same language, the same religion, and the same trade. And the same goes for the Swahili city-states. They're lumped together into one big group because they share the same language, the same trade, and the same religion. The Swahili language is part of a language base called Bantu. Bantu originally comes from West Africa, right about here. And we see an event called the Bantu Migration, where these Bantu people leave this area and expand all over the continent. And it's when a large group settles in the east and brings with them their culture and language that we see the culture of Swahili form. And the Bantu migration isn't an event that's like, oh, we're experiencing the Bantu migration today sort of thing. This was this took place over thousands of years, and historians saw a pattern of Bantu people leaving and moving to the east and forming Swahili cities, and then gave this pattern a name many years later. Swahili cities adopted Islam, they built giant mosques, and even had many trade exports like ivory, timber, and even slaves. Now, Swahili cities might not be huge into trading slaves right now, but Africa as a whole is definitely big into trading slaves within the African continent, and that's something that we're actually going to talk about later on in the year. During the Middle Ages in South Africa, you would have found the stone city of Great Zimbabwe. It was located here in the modern-day country of Zimbabwe, and the ruins that are still here today are the second largest ruins in all of Africa, the first being the pyramids in Egypt. The big question has been, though, who built this gigantic city? We do know that when the city thrived in the Middle Ages, there were three main sections: the hill complex where the king lived, the great enclosure reserved for the royal family to live, and the valley complex where regular people lived. We know that Great Zimbabwe was a large trading center, and due to its closeness to Swahili city-states, they were able to join the Swahili city-states in the Indian Ocean trade routes. And we know this from finding artifacts in the area such as pottery and currency from Asia. By the 15th century, Great Zimbabwe was abandoned, and we don't know for certain why. Some archaeologists have theorized issues with overpopulation and citizens just packing their bags and moving somewhere else with more space, but we don't know that for sure. What we do know is later on in history, the question of who built this city will become a very controversial issue. When southern Africa is later colonized, the invaders pretty much said, "Oh, no way locals could have made something this cool. It must have come from the Greeks, maybe the Arabs. Hey, maybe this was the location of the Queen of Sheba." For some reason, they just could not fathom Africans creating their own city. But do I need to go back over the magnificence of Western Africa or the pyramids? Like, I just don't see why it's that difficult. But okay. I mean, it's only been recently that any significant archaeologist claimed, hey, yeah, I think this was built by Africans. And you would not believe how many governments around the world are just, no way, not a chance, don't repeat that. But over time, I mean, the evidence 100% confirms Great Zimbabwe was definitely created by Africans, just in case you were wondering. Now, this does not even begin to cover how ethnically and culturally diverse Africa is, but hopefully we scratched the surface enough to make you interested in doing more research yourself. Next time, we're going to be doing something similar with Asia. Obviously, it will not be able to truly capture the unique diversity, but we're certainly going to try and do our best. So, I will see you then.